the biggest story in sports right now is college football, right? Because everything else in sports is kind of headed down the right pathway. Now, you could argue maybe not college basketball, but college basketball is not going to start till November. We have time to see what works, what doesn't. Is it possible? Is it impossible? And get college basketball going in the right direction down the road. But college football is the one that remains completely up in the air as we speak, as the Major League Baseball gets set to return this week, as the NBA gets set to return the following week. College football is just kind of in this weird space where everybody's back on campus, everybody is back working out, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. And I think that is the important place to start. Before I go too far, I will say a couple things. First of all, I think we got a couple big pieces of news that I actually think are great signs that we are actually going to get some semblance of normal college football, and we got those two pieces of news this weekend. But before we get to those pieces of news, I want to reiterate something that I have said on this show time and time again, and that's that right now, as I record, July 20th, 2020, nobody knows anything about college football, what it's going to look like, how many games are going to be played, et cetera, et cetera. And so to even backtrack a little bit, I actually want to contextualize something that you guys are seeing a lot, right? I think over the course of this summer, I would say in general, I have been pretty much a positive person in terms of me thinking that we get college football back on the field in September, in October, in November. And I do think a lot of the media has been very negative about this topic. And I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to pick on people. But outside of what their personal opinion is, there's a couple things I want to tell you before I explain why I thought this was actually a good weekend for college football. The first thing I want to explain is very simply this. Is that the people that run college football are no different at their core than you and I are. And this is what I mean by this. I read a lot of these articles by Pat Forty and Pete Thamel and Dan Wolken, and they quote, an anonymous athletic director says there's no chance we play college football. And an anonymous Power 5 this says there's no chance we play college football. And two assistant coaches from the group of five say there's no chance that we play college football. And what I will say is this, I am not criticizing the individual reporter. I actually, frankly, weirdly, do not know any of those three guys that I mentioned, Pete Thamel, Pat Forty, Dan Wolken, have no personal vendetta against any of them. But what I will tell you is what I just said a minute ago. Their sources, just like my sources, are no different than you and I. And what I mean by that is this, is that if you take a random sampling of 100 college athletic directors or 100 assistant football coaches or 100 assistant basketball coaches or 100 head football coaches, they're no different than you and I in the sense that there are some that are super positive, there are some that are super negative, there are some that are glasses half full, there are some that the sky is falling, there are some that don't pay attention to it and are totally tunnel vision on their particular team or their particular school, there are some that are smarter, there are some that are not as smart. And so I think that's an important piece here because I think when you read an article from a Pete Thamel or a Dan Wolken, I'm not criticizing their reporting, but what I am saying is one athletic director, two Power 5 assistant coaches, they don't speak for the entire sport, okay? So for every one that is saying there is zero chance, there's another one somewhere that's probably thinking, you know what, we might be able to pull this off. And so I think that is an important element of this. I'll give you a quick example, then I'll get to the second thing I was going to say, which is that, when the Ivy League announced that they would not play fall sports, a day or two after the Big Ten makes their announcement, the Pac-12 makes their announcement, I texted just a few buddies of mine in coaching and kind of just asked them their thoughts on the overall trend of the Ivies making their decision, the other conferences making their decision. I had one guy say, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The Ivy did their thing. Everybody else is going to follow suit, okay? I don't want to say he's a glasses half empty guy. I think he's being a little bit more of a realist, but I also texted somebody else, and they said, oh, my God, typical Ivies. Ivies are always trying to show us how smart they are and how forward-thinking they are and how far ahead they are. And you know what? This guy was a basketball coach. He said, you know what? I think we're going to get on the court, maybe not the first game in November. I think we're going to have a lot of games. I think we're going to have a pretty normal season. And so just that microcosm of 2 text messages I sent gives you an understanding that there are polar opposites within the sport, within the coaching community, within the AD community. And I do think that's a really important thing to understand when you read all of these doom and gloom articles. The other thing I would say is that, as I said to lead this segment, nobody knows anything right now. Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, he doesn't know anything. He's very educated. He's having a lot of important meetings. He's talking to doctors. He's talking to his head football coaches. He's talking to his school presidents. But he doesn't know anything definitive. Mark Emmert sitting in his ivory tower, he doesn't know anything definitive. Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, doesn't know anything definitive. Heck, Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big 10, who has already made the decision to go league-only games, doesn't know anything definitive. Are we going to start September 1st? Are we going to start the middle of September? Are we going to play a full 10 games? We don't know. Nobody knows. So don't believe any of these articles that says 100% we're not playing or 100% we are playing. But what I will tell you is, while I have been more of an optimist, I will admit that I did see 2 things this weekend that actually made me feel pretty good that we could get some semblance of football on the field in the fall and pretty close to week 1 of the college football season. And I'll tell you those 2 things. The first thing was very simply this. I tweeted about it. You probably saw my Twitter timeline at Aaron_Torres. Alabama made kind of a pseudo-important scheduling move on Saturday. And for people who don't remember, Alabama was slated to open the season against USC in Dallas. Pac-12 announces they're going to league-only games. Obviously, that game is canceled. Well, Alabama on Saturday, a report comes out from AL.com, the biggest newspaper in that state, that Alabama is on the brink of replacing that game with USC with a home game against BYU. For people who don't remember, BYU in football is an independent. BYU was scheduled to play Utah in week 1 of the college football season. That game has obviously been canceled because Utah also is in the Pac-12. And so why do I bring it up? I think it's important because I do not believe that on July 20th, Alabama would be trying to schedule a game for week 1 if they did not believe they were going to be on the field. I mean, just think about it in its simplest context, right? Nick Saban is unquestionably the most powerful head coach in college football. I'm not saying that he's single-handedly going to force the SEC onto the field, but do you think Nick Saban would be working the phones if he knew a call from Greg Sankey was coming on Monday that we're not playing out a conference game? Maybe Greg Sankey is working over his head. I'm using a little common sense here, a little common denominator, trying to put 2 and 2 together. I'll be honest, I don't know Nick Saban. I can't get him on the phone. I can't ask him myself. But I'm using common sense to say Nick Saban's a pretty powerful person. Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, is a pretty powerful person. Do you think either of those guys would be burning up the phones to get a game on the schedule for week 1, to call up other schools, to get contracts going, to figure out travel, to figure out logistics? Do you think those schools, you think Alabama would be doing all that if they knew the SEC was going to come out tomorrow and say, no out-of-conference games? It could happen. It just doesn't seem likely, though. So to me, that is a great step in the right direction of getting actual college football back on the field. The second thing, which I think is also important, another thing that I tweeted about, another thing that is a big deal relative to college athletics, college football getting games on the field week 1 is this. The SEC announced on Friday that they will honor all player scholarships, and that if a player decides not to play this season because of COVID-19, because of fears, because of concerns, because of worries about being infected, because of worries about infecting family or friends, they will not be punished for not playing this season. They will be able to maintain their scholarship, they will be able to take a redshirt year, and they will be able to come back next season. That might not sound like much, but to me that is huge, and let me explain why. The reason why is very simply this, is that over the course of the last, 6 months, not 6, but 3 months, 2 months, 4 months, since we realized there would be no college basketball tournament, and since we kind of turned our attention to college football, there have been two big reasons why the people that don't think we should play college football have really just hammered home, we can't play college football. One is safety, and two, because it's not fair to those poor, disenfranchised college athletes that aren't getting paid. Don't we feel so terrible for them? Well, the first one, let's start with health. And I will say, again, I'm not trying to be Mr. Positivity. I'm not trying to be Mr. Rainbows and Sunshine. I will say there are some things that are not working in college football's favor right now. As we know, as you see on every single news station when you turn it on, there are numbers that are going the wrong direction in a lot of places in America, including many SEC states. I'll let your governor, I'll let your peer group discuss that. That is obviously not a great thing, right? That is not a thing that is working in college football's favor. The other thing is the great unknown about what happens when students come back to campus. Is it going to be a petri dish? Is everybody going to just infect one another? How do you keep college kids away from other college kids? How do you keep the guys away from the girls? How do you keep the football players away from the keg parties? We do not have the answers to those questions yet, and it certainly will not be easy. But what I can tell you definitively is this. I have been saying since May, because I remember talking to a coach, it might have even been in April, and he told me then, and it has become a common talking point then, but he told me, he said, the safest place our kids can be is on a college campus. Not at home where they're around grandma, grandpa, mom might work at the grocery store. She might be going into an office. You're coming back home. You're working out. Maybe the facilities aren't very clean. You come back to a college campus, that is the safest place you can be. Because we are going to be testing you every day. If, God forbid, you catch this illness, we have the best medical staff you can possibly have access to. We're going to quarantine you. We're going to keep you healthy. We're going to monitor you. And we're ideally, in a perfect world, going to help you get through this, right? I've been saying that since April, maybe May. Well, it's proven to be true. For all the talk about all the numbers, this school with this positive, that school with that positive, most of the schools, once they get kids into the bubble of being around the football team, of being tested regularly, of being away from outside influences, the testing has actually gone well, and nobody wants to talk about this. I will give you an example. The University of Oklahoma, when they had their football players return to campus, the entire team got tested. 14 positive tests when they returned to campus. Well, guess what? Last week, the football team was tested. 98 players, 30 coaches, 0 positive tests. Say what you want. The testing is working. The bubble in college sports is working for right now. And it's not just at Oklahoma. Penn State has done 178 tests of student athletes, 0 positive tests. Kentucky football tested 108 players last week, 0 positive tests. Michigan State athletics, 0 positive tests. So I bring this all up to say that when you get the kids back in the bubble, it is safe. They are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're being monitored the way they're supposed to be monitored. And if they're staying out of trouble, this thing is working. Now, the issues have come, like at LSU, when the players went to bars. Kansas State, the players went to an off-campus party. All of a sudden, Kansas State has 14 positive tests. All of a sudden, LSU has 30-something. They got to quarantine. They got to delay workouts. There have been other delays. Ohio State, North Carolina. Ohio State was back like a day later. Nobody talks about it. They caught it. They got it under control. And so to me, the two biggest issues all along were, is this going to be safe? Well, right now, it's safe. Right now, these players are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, when they're paying attention, when they're not going to bars and hanging out and doing crazy stuff at night, they're testing negative, which is a great thing. Nobody wants to talk about the positives. And I'm not saying it's all positives, but this is a positive. What did I just say? 108 tests at Kentucky, they're all negative. 178 at Penn State, they're all negative. 98 players at Oklahoma and 30 staff, they're all negative. That is a positive. So I think when you add that in with what I just said, that no student athlete will be punished for not playing this season, I think that's a great sign. I think that what the SEC did, which, by the way, Big Ten schools have done the same, is said if you don't feel comfortable playing, we're not going to make you. We all think of college sports as this big, bad, money-making machine, and it's this awful place. No, it ain't. They're telling you, we're going to give you a free year of school, a free year of housing, free books, and you don't even have to play if you don't want to. So credit college athletics, but now I don't know what the naysayers really have to say to argue that we shouldn't have a season. Now, things can change. I admit that. We can have outbreaks. We could find out that when you play in practice or when you play in games, it's easy to transmit. When kids come back to campus, it could get worse. But right now, I tell you this all the time, I can only do the show on July 20th based on the information that I have July 20th, and that is that things are going in the right direction as we speak right now with everything to do with college athletics. Again, it could change, but it is going in the right direction. And to close, what I would say is this. Greg Sankey has said, commissioner of the SEC, many times that a decision will come in late July, early August, and I think we're missing the reason why. And so what I think is we have about 2 weeks now to really make some tough decisions. I'm not saying that the decisions that are going to get made are going to be easy or that they're all going to be positive. But I think there's 2 reasons that the SEC has kind of earmarked right around August 1st to decide if we're going to go forward with football as we intend. The first one is it gives us a chance, it gives college football a chance to just see how things are going in other sports, right? The MLS has been in this bubble for about 3-4 weeks now. I know some organizations had to pull out, some games have gotten delayed, but for the most part, it's going pretty well. I wake up in the morning to work out. There's an MLS game on my TV. I get wind down at the end of the night, 10:30 Eastern, and we got MLS games on my TV. I'd say it's going pretty good. Not perfect. We're not shooting for perfect here. But it's going pretty well. Major League Baseball going pretty well. The NBA in the bubble seems like things are going in the right direction, but I think college athletics naturally wants to say, let's see what happens. Let's see how these organizations and these leagues do. The second thing, which I haven't heard anybody talk about, but this is a big week for college football, and I'll tell you why. July 20th, the day that many of you are listening to this, that is when schools can start actual on-the-field practice. Up until right now, it was kind of, working out with a coach, working out with strength training, working out with this, working out with that. Now we're starting to get on the field. Now we're all starting to touch the football. Now Trevor Lawrence is starting to hand the ball off to his running back and throw it to his wide receivers. Now the offensive line is banging on the defensive line. And I think we're going to find out pretty quick if this illness is transmittable by an offensive lineman banging up against that D tackle for 45 snaps over the course of an afternoon. If a cornerback going in press coverage against a wide receiver is how this is transmitted. If Trevor Lawrence can transmit it by handing the ball off to his running back. So I don't have the answers because nobody has the answers, and that is the important thing to remember. Nobody is 100% certain on anything right now. And it's July 20th, and it sucks. And you guys are fans, and many of you are season ticket holders, and many of you want answers. And we don't have answers right now. But what I'm telling you is that for at least one weekend, for at least 2 or 3 days, I believe we got some steps in the right direction. Alabama would not be scheduling BYU if Alabama did not believe that right now the plan was to be on the field week 1. And I don't believe the SEC would make this move, again, if they didn't believe that there was a chance that there was going to be football in a couple weeks. And it also eliminates one of the biggest arguments that people have against football. Well, if they don't, these kids are trapped. If they don't play, they're going to lose their scholarship. Well, now they're not. And as I've said many times on Twitter, the vast majority of parents and players that I speak with, they actually want to play. Because as I've said many times, there aren't a lot of Trevor Lawrences and Justin Fields. There aren't a lot of guys that can miss a full season and become millionaires 6 or 8 months from now. So we will see, but I do think that this weekend was a step in the right direction for college football, and we will see if it translates to actually getting a product on the field week 1, but I felt like it was a pretty good step.